You can go ahead and put them in the chat if you would prefer. And I'm going to turn this over to Lee, and looking forward to hearing about guards today. Thank you.
Sure thing. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. My name is Lee Wright. I'm the superintendent at the Virginia Tech Southwest Ag Research Center. Not exactly sure how I became the expert on guard dogs, but gave a talk at the Virginia North Carolina Shepherd Symposium back in January, and seemed to be accepted pretty well. So I think that's how I ended up here today. But I will be glad to answer any questions as we go along, and I will see how this share screen button works this time. All right. So, all right. So talking about guard dogs, when do you know that you need a guard dog? That's $1 million question, right? Well, if you've got sheep, you probably need a guard dog or a guardian animal of some sort. And I'm not going to claim that dogs are better than llamas, or llamas are better than dogs, or donkeys, or vice versa. But we have had donkeys before. But we prefer the dogs at our place, and we prefer the dogs here at the research farm. Common predators, this is a good place to start. I mean, you really need to know what kind of predators are out there and what you need to be on the lookout for and what your dogs may encounter. And I've just got a list of the common predators here. So, of course, coyotes are probably one of the biggest ones in our area. I'm not sure about you all, but from what I hear from some folks in North Carolina, it definitely seems like coyotes can be a problem there. Of course, bobcats and fox, maybe to a lesser extent. Most of the time they sort of go after smaller prey, whether it be field mice or rabbits or groundhogs or things like that. Sometimes they don't mess with lambs too much, but in certain cases I have heard and seen that, you know, they can be problems as well, especially for small lambs, baby lambs. We have actually had a few people in our area closer to the mountains that have had problems with bears attacking sheep and causing problems. And also eagles up in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I've heard of some folks having some problems with eagles. So luckily we've not had that problem here. And down in Middle Tennessee, I actually heard a friend of mine was telling me he had some eagle troubles back earlier in the spring. Two other things to look for, the turkey vultures with the red heads and the black vultures with the black heads. Typically the red-headed vultures, the turkey vultures, they're typically drawn in by smell, and they're carcass feeders. So a lot of times you won't see many of them unless you have a dead animal. They don't tend to attack quite like the black-headed vultures do. The black-headed vultures have a much more keen an eyesight than the red-headed vultures. And if they see a weak lamb or even an adult sheep out in the field, we have seen these black-headed vultures kind of come in and will actually kill an animal, peck its eyes out before it's even dead. You typically don't see that with the red-headed vultures, but the black ones can really be aggressive sometimes. So not sure if you guys have had troubles with those, probably have, but that's just one key difference in those two types of vultures. Of course, the most lethal problems that I don't think people really give enough credit for, whether they don't know or they don't pay attention, your neighbor's dogs, or even stray dogs, packs of dogs, those can be the most lethal and can do a lot of damage. A lot of times with wildlife predators, they'll come in and they're looking for a quick and easy meal. So they'll typically come in, whether it's a small lamb or, you know, young sheep, young ewes, maybe some replacement ewes out in the field that are not guarded. A lot of times those stray dogs and coyotes will attack those pretty quickly. And again, coyotes being the biggest problem for us, we see them come in for that quick meal. They'll tear that sheep up. They'll go in for intestines, liver, kidneys, heart, things like that. They're just looking for something quick and high energy. They don't eat a lot of meat. And that's one way you can distinguish between neighborhood dogs and a wildlife predator. Usually with neighborhood dogs or a pack of stray dogs, they'll just tear those sheep up, tear into the meat, and it won't be as much of an efficient kill. It'll just be very kind of barbaric and spread things out. And you may see that sometimes in the spring when a mother coyote is getting her pups out and first teaching them to hunt. Sometimes that'll mimic what stray dogs or neighborhood dogs will look like. They just really tear them all to pieces and they're just strung out. So that's just kind of some background information on what kind of predators you probably need a guardian animal for. Sorry about that. That was actually your all's new sheep and goat specialist trying to call me. We can talk about him later. What if you don't see any predators? Well, if you have a good guard dog, you probably won't see predators. But that doesn't mean they're not there. And if you look at the picture over here to the side and you see those 3 coyotes in the bed of a truck, we had a guard dog here at the research farm and didn't think we had many predator problems. We weren't losing any sheep. We weren't seeing any predators. But as you can see from the snow in the background, once we had about 6 inches of snow hit the ground, we started seeing those coyote tracks just scattered random places around the farm. And of course, it was surrounding where our sheep flock was. But like I say, we weren't losing any animals. So we hadn't been paying attention to it till that snow came. So we started setting some snares where those tracks were going. And we caught those 3 coyotes in one night. So predators are always there, whether you see them or whether you don't, just know that they're there. And just having the presence of that dog, whether he's making noise and barking, whether he's walking around marking his territory around the fence row, those predators know that he's in there. They may not know exactly what his job is. They may not know that he's there to protect those animals, but they do know that it's probably, if they're going to sit back in the woods and watch, they're going to see that dog and they're going to know that his presence is twice as big as they are. And like I say, if they're looking for a quick and easy meal in and out, they don't want to fight that dog. They don't want to take a chance of fighting a dog twice their size just looking for an easy meal. They're going to keep going and they're going to keep looking for that meal somewhere else. So those guard dogs need to be seen, they need to be heard, and they need to be smelled by predators daily. So if you're moving your dogs around, whether you're keeping them with your sheep or in an adjacent field, sometimes that's good enough. I mean, my wife raises Labrador retrievers. We've raised labs for 16 years now. So, you know, we've got about 10 dogs at our house. 3 of them are guard dogs with sheep and the rest of them are labs. But needless to say, we have a noisy hillside where we live. There's constant dogs around our area and around those sheep, and that's enough to keep coyotes away. So that in itself is a definite benefit for having a guard dog around, even if he's not staying with your sheep. But again, those predators are always there, and that 24/7 round the clock needs to be addressed if at all possible with a guard dog's presence. Question I always get, well, when do I need to get a guard dog? I'm just getting in the sheep business. Do I need a dog? Well, from the looks of these pictures, it's absolutely too late to go get a dog right now. But the bad thing is, when people are looking for puppies, we've raised guard dogs for years as well. We don't raise as many as we used to. But 90% of the time when people would call looking for a guard dog, this is what has happened. And you're not going to go buy a puppy. You're not going to wait 2 months or 6 months or 8 months for somebody to have a litter of puppies and bring a puppy in and expect that puppy to do the job to keep this from happening. It's not going to happen. That puppy is going to have a good 6, 8 months to a year before he's capable of handling a situation that happened this night when we had this problem. This was a case where this was a farm that we owned. It's about 10 miles from where we live. Um, we had had guard dogs over there for years, 12 years actually. Ended up losing both of those guard dogs within a year of one another. They were the first two Pyrenees we ever had. They were always there, always had a presence, never had a problem with a coyote. As soon as that second dog passed away, I just took it for granted. I said, you know what? We hadn't had coyote problems over here. I think we'll be fine. So went about 2 months with no dog presence, and come to find out it was a pack of coyotes. It wasn't neighborhood dogs. This looks like neighborhood dogs, but it was young coyotes. Um, so, we ended up snaring four over the course of a couple of nights, and some friends of mine came in and killed three other ones within the next week. So there was a huge amount of coyote pressure at this farm, but we didn't know it because we had dogs there for 12 years. But as soon as those dogs were gone, they took their opportunity and they hit hard. I think, these pictures here is very minuscule to what we lost. I think over 2 nights we lost about 16 young yearling ewes. So, and the only way to keep that from happening is to raise a good guard dog. And we were talking a little bit before we started here about bringing mature dogs in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along, or if you guys have questions about that at the end or during, feel free to ask. There's all kinds of different breeds of guard dogs. Miramas, Pyrenees, Anatolians, the list goes on. There's lots of potential out there. You need to find a notable breed that you're interested in, do your research on it. I mean, there's tons of information online. There's tons of information on Facebook, some of which may or may not be trusted. But if you're looking for a notable breed, talk to breeders or breeders and producers that have breeds of dogs that you're interested in. Do your homework on them. Crossbreeding can offer some advantages. We've had some Pyrenees Anatolian crosses that have done well. I've heard some people say that, Pyrenees just aren't aggressive enough. They're a little mild natured, maybe they're worried about a lot of predator problems and they don't think those Pyrenees are going to be aggressive. And I've heard people say that Anatolians can be too aggressive. The Anatolian that's here in this picture is actually one of those older dogs that we took in that had worked out great for us. We took him in when he was about 3 years old and he worked out perfectly. But as far as aggression goes and everything I had always heard about Anatolians, this dog does not fit that mold. This is the biggest baby of a dog I have ever seen in my life. But when he's in a field, I mean, he stands almost waist high on me. He's a beast as far as size. And coyotes are not going to mess with him. They're not going to come. They don't know how mean he is or how he lacks meanness, but they're not going to come in there trying to steal a quick meal with him anywhere around. So just his presence does the job. He doesn't have to be mean. If you do look into crossbreeds or you are talking to a breeder that is crossbreeding some of these dogs, please make sure it's a guardian breed crossed with a guardian breed. Because I have seen ads and I have talked to people that guard dogs crossed with a herding dog, that's probably not an intentional cross. If it was a huge mistake. It's not a 2-for-1 deal. Okay, they're not going to guard your sheep and herd your sheep simultaneously. They are just genetically wired completely different. And you're just screwing with the genetics when you try and make that cross and think it's going to work. It's going to lead to a lot of problems. So, but guard dogs to guard dog breeds do have their place. And, again, talk to the breeder, ask questions about their dogs, about the parents of the dogs that you're thinking of getting into. But the single purpose of that dog, of course, is to protect your flock of sheep, no matter how they get the job done, as long as they keep them alive. So again, once you've picked out a breed, do your research again, do your homework on potential breeders. You know, whether it's somebody close by that you know, whether you found somebody online or you've been given a reference from somebody that raises good dogs, do your homework on that breeder. Call them up, ask them tons of questions. Ask them about the dogs that they're breeding and why they're breeding them like they are, whether it's a crossbreed or whether it's purebred. Um, Ask to see the parents. If they're going to have a litter of puppies and you're going and thinking about making the investment in some of those pups, ask to see the parents. There have been more cases than not that I've had people call me with troublesome guard dog puppies that they've gone and purchased and they're just not working out. And you get to digging and asking a few questions. When they went to go pick those puppies up, the daddy dog was laying over in the corner of the barn, and mama dog was a porch dog laying up on the house porch with a fancy little collar on, and she was more of a pet than she was a guard dog. Well, to get pups started off correctly, mama especially, because they're spending so much time with mama, she needs to be an outstanding guard dog because they are going to learn a lot from her the first 6 weeks of their life, first 6 to 8 weeks of their life. That's where they're going to get a lot of their habits and a lot of their behaviors are going to be learned from their mother before you even pick them up. Again, ask that breeder the pros and cons of the breed that they're raising. Ask them the pros and the cons of their parents, because any of you that have had guard dogs know that there are pros and cons. You're never going to have that perfect guard dog. There's always going to be one thing or 10 things that you don't like about that dog. And if you ask that breeder, look for honesty. If that breeder tells you, well, the mother, she likes to go through gates and she'll travel from field to field and she may not stay with the sheep, but you know, she still does her job, even if she doesn't stay exactly where I want her to. Or, well, you know, daddy dog, he kind of runs around. His presence is here, but he doesn't really stay with the sheep at all. You know, look for that honesty with that breeder. And you'll find out a lot about what to expect from those puppies, that you may be able to negate some of those behaviors and head them off at the pass before they develop that. But if that breeder is telling you, oh, these are the most perfect dogs I've ever had, there's not a problem one, you know, they never make any mistakes, they're the best dogs ever, chances are they're probably not being too honest with you. You know, and I'm not saying there's not good dogs out there, because there are. We've all had good dogs as well. But one thing you really need to focus on and remember is seeking honesty from that breeder. And even if they're telling you one or two little quirks, chances are, you know, they're being honest with you if they're telling you something's wrong with them. Make sure the pups are raised with livestock and exposed to people. This is a huge thing that really needs to take place. I've got some other pictures you'll see in a minute, but when we raise a litter of pups, you can see the picture of this mama dog and her pups. We've got them confined in a small corner of the barn. You know, those pups that are on her right there are probably about 3 to 4 weeks old. You know, they're up, they're mobile, they're moving around. You know, the first couple of weeks, there's not a lot going on. They're just laying there with their eyes closed, looking for mama and something to eat. But once they hit that 3, 4, and 5 week old mark, they're starting to move around with her. So we put them in a little bit bigger pen where they're following her. They see what she does. As those pups get to 5 and 6 weeks of age, we tend to open it up a little bit, let mama start traveling the pastures with the sheep, let those puppies sort of follow her around and see what she does, how she marks her territory, how she follows along the fence lines, how she interacts with those sheep. They're going to learn a lot from her at ages 5 and 6 and 7 weeks old. You know, typically when we've raised litters of pups before, we don't ever get rid of a pup or sell a pup until it's at least 8 weeks old. Because there's so much to be learned from that mother up until that point. Now, when you get to that 8 and 10 week mark, mama's tired of them. She's looking for every way she can to get away from those pups. She's just tired of being a mother, and she's earned her keep. She's done her job. So at 7 to 8 weeks, we're typically pulling those pups off, letting the pups kind of wander around, but we're moving mama to another location where they can't find her. Let her have some rest and rebound. She's done a great job for us. But there's still a lot to learn in that 8 to 10 week time frame for those puppies. And we can do a lot as breeders in that time frame too. We know what they've experienced with their mother. We kind of start to see the personalities of those puppies during that 8 to 10 week period when mother's not with them anymore. So we can tell which one maybe is the alpha pup, which ones are a little more reserved or laid back, which ones might do better in a pair, which ones maybe should be alone, as an alpha dog, going out and learning the ropes on his own at a new place. So as a breeder, ask those questions as well. If they're doing their job as a responsible breeder and they're asking you for a huge dollar amount for these puppies, whether it's $300, $1,000, whatever these people are asking, I've seen prices all over the board. If they're asking for you to make that kind of an investment in your puppy, then you want to know that they have done their job as a responsible breeder in making and starting these puppies off really good for you as a sheep producer. So those things are just, you really need to ask a lot of questions is what it boils down to. And I think the more you talk and the more you ask questions of a breeder, the more you're going to understand their personality and what they've really done and what kind of investment they've really made in these puppies. So you should feel more comfortable putting that investment and that dollar amount down to buy those puppies to take home to do the job that you really need them to do. As far as having pups, once you get them home, that 8 to 10 week mark, if you go much past 10 to 12 weeks, there again, those puppies are already starting to bond with the breeder and the surroundings that are there. So they need to go somewhere new at that point. They've gone through the stress of leaving mom. They need to go ahead and go through the stress of leaving the litter and get to their new location, get to your farm, learn your surroundings, learn you, and just feel comfortable and settle in over a few weeks, before they really start getting out to experience what you need them to learn their way around. And again, the last quote I've got here on this slide, the best guard dog for you will be raised as a pup by you on your farm. And again, that 8 to 10 week period, when they're typically leaving a breeder and going to somebody else's farm, they have a lot to learn, and that's a great time for them to learn after they're over the stress of leaving those litter mates. It's not easy raising good puppies. I can tell you that. Being a breeder for years, it's a chore. It's a job. It really is. It's not a huge time window, a couple of months out of a year, but it's a huge investment in time for a breeder. And if they do it right, I would have no problem paying good money for a good guard dog that I know had been started right. If I had my doubts or didn't really think maybe it had been started correctly, somebody just selling them for $100, $150, $200, they're just trying to make a quick buck and get the pups out the door. So again, it goes back to asking questions of those breeders and finding out just how invested they are in what they're doing. Price equals your total investment by the years of service that dog is going to provide for you. Large breeds of dogs typically have a life expectancy 8 to 12 years. We had, I guess one of those first ones that we had, I was talking about earlier, both those dogs lived to be 13 and 14 years old. They were great dogs. They were very healthy. They lived a good life. We didn't overfeed them. We didn't underfeed them. They killed groundhogs. They killed raccoons. They did their job. Anything that was in that field that was not a sheep, they killed. So, a lot of times they were eating stuff we didn't really want them to eat, but, that's why you keep giving them rabies shot and take care of them and give them their vaccinations. Um, Guard animals, again, are expenses, are tax exemptions. So, please be aware of that. So that investment you're making in that dog, um, you know, you can write those off as a taxable expense. When you bring a pup home and you want to start it in a small confined space to make that introduction to your sheep, and this picture you can see, it's in our barn. We've got a dog that we were starting for ourselves here a couple of years ago. You can see the crate kind of back in the corner. This is actually the same corner of the barn where we had the mama and the litter of pups earlier. But what we did here was transform that into a place to bring 2 or 3 ewes and some lambs in with this pup. Uh, it was his space. He was familiar and comfortable with that space, which was good. But when we introduced sheep into that location and closed them up in there with him, I mean, it was a little bit different for him. But this is kind of what they need to encounter when they go to your farm. This is kind of a best case scenario. Um, if you've got some young lambs, maybe not small lambs, but 40, 50, 60 pounders, they're bigger than the puppy is. And that's key. You want something bigger, but you don't really want flighty sheep to start a pup in a small space like this when you're first introducing them at home. I always like to bring 2 or 3 good mamas that are going to take care of their lambs. If that puppy gets kind of nippy or chasing them around and chewing on a leg or an ear or a tail, if you've got a good aggressive mother sheep, she's going to put that pup in his place. She's going to pound him, and he's got that crate. He's got that safe space to go to, so he can get away from that beating he's going to incur from those mama ewes that are just protecting their lambs, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, he's learned his lesson. You didn't have to teach him a lesson. He's already learned a little bit from his mother, but being this age, he's still a puppy. And that's the one thing that is really hard for people to understand. How long does the puppy stage last? Is it just a couple of weeks? Is it a couple of months? Is it a year? Well, it really depends on the dog. But the reason it depends on the dog is, is that dog being introduced properly at that 10, 12, 15 week of age mark with those sheep and letting the sheep teach that dog the lesson. You don't need to be the one teaching the dog the lesson. The sheep need to teach the dog the lesson. And the more you understand that, the better off you're going to be and the better dog you're going to have. So when you start that dog in there, you want the dog to know you. You want the dog to realize, okay, this person comes, pats me on the head, gives me a bowl of food every day, makes sure I have water, talks to me. You're letting that dog know that you're there to take care of it. You're there to help it. But the true lessons that dog needs to learn in life on how to be a good guard dog, he's going to learn more from the sheep than he's going to learn from you. So that's one thing to really be aware of. And flighty sheep in this area, just nervous Nellies, as I call them, that are always throwing their heads up, just that pup moving in the least little bit the wrong direction and they get flighty and start making laps or run over top of him. That's not good for that pup. That's not really teaching him anything. He needs to learn to live with the sheep, not be afraid of them. Eventually, time's going to come where he's big enough that he's not going to be afraid of them, and paybacks might be kind of bad at that point, if you know what I'm saying. I know we've all probably experienced that dog once he gets to 6 or 8 months old and he's outgrown those sheep and he's tired of getting bullied. Then you start seeing somebody chewing on a leg or chewing on a tail of an older ewe, getting somebody down, getting revenge. A lot of that happens when you introduce them improperly early in life. So again, be sure and have that safe zone for that puppy to go to. Again, raising good puppies is not easy. And the definition of patience is right here at the top. The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. How many of us have been there when we've been trying to raise a puppy or a guard dog? It takes a lot of patience, a whole lot of patience. And sometimes we might not have quite enough, or we tend to run out before it's over with. But again, start slowly with those pups. Take them from that small spot in the barn to a small open pasture just outside of the barn. They can still come in and out to their safe zone, a familiar place, but they get out and they start learning where you want them to be, where you need them to be. And then they're going to start making that bond with more sheep other than the ones you just have that you've set aside to start them those first few weeks. Um, as you expand those boundaries, you're probably going to learn a lot about those puppies and what they can and cannot do. It amazes me when these pups, are 2, 3, 4 months old and you think, oh, wow, they're getting big. They can't get through that hole. Well, guess what? They probably can. It never ceases to amaze me what one of these large breed dogs, what kind of hole they can go through when they're determined to go. Whether it's crawling through a gate or going under a gate or where a groundhog hole may be, under a fence. If they want to go, they'll find a way to go. And at that point, that's when you need to step in and start setting your boundaries to help that dog understand, okay, you're not supposed to be over there because I don't want you there. And I've got listed here yokes or tubs. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but when I say tubs, some of these plastic protein tubs that we get for sheep or cattle, they work really good with a chain. Just let them drag that thing around. If they go through a gate, sometimes they'll shimmy up a gate and they'll slip through where the slats are wide enough for them to go through. If they've got one of those tubs on them, just an empty tub they're dragging around, they'll go through the gate, but that tub's not going to. So they're stuck. And they just have to stand there, learn their lesson, and wait for you to come back and put them where you want them to go. Yokes. I don't know if any of you have seen yokes, but I've seen them made out of several different things, either wood slats or I like PVC. You just cut like 3 short pieces of PVC, about a foot and a half long. You can bolt them together, just drill multiple holes in them where you can adjust the size around their neck and just zip tie them to their collar, and they'll spin all the way around their neck. They can lay down, they can get comfortable, they can do whatever they want. But if they walk up to one of those gates and they start to go through, then that PVC pipe, as they stick their head through, catches on the gate and it stops them from going through and they just can't go. We've had success with those also. So, there's different things you can do. And again, teaching these puppies those kind of lessons at an early age will prevent a lot of those problems later in life as they get bigger and they're a year or 2 or 3 years old. And then they've gotten into that habit and you can't stop them from doing it because they're determined to do it because they've already done it before. So if you can limit those early in life, it'll pay dividends later on. Next topic here, pups are going to play. No matter how old they are, whether they're that 10, 12 weeks when you get them home or whether they're 2, 3, 6 months, they're going to play. And sometimes their play can be a little more aggressive than you'd like it to be. And you have to step in. You have to teach them their boundaries. You have to maintain being the alpha in your farm setting. That dog has to understand that you're in charge. So sometimes you're going to have to discipline those dogs to teach them a lesson. So, and with certain age groups of those pups, again, sometimes pups may do better in a pair. They'll play with each other instead of trying to play with lambs or play with sheep. But sometimes that can backfire. We had that conversation before the meeting started with somebody, and sometimes they'll team up on a sheep, and you may have to separate them. But sometimes they may get along better at a young age with a partner and get through that playful puppy stage with each other more so than with the sheep. And then as they start to get a little older and a little more size to them, you can sort of strategically separate and put them in adjoining pastures where they can still see each other. They still have that bond, but they learn to do their job individually rather than as a pair. Or sometimes they may work great as a pair and you can just leave them that way. Just depends on the dogs and the circumstances. And once we get into answering questions here shortly, I'm sure that could be the answer to a lot of the questions. I'll tell you that right off the bat. just the temperament, personality of the dog is going to dictate a lot in how you need to react to them and how your training needs to go. So protecting your livestock investment. I don't know if you can see this picture here on the right may be a little hazy. It was a pretty sunset picture, but after I got it, I realized this group of young ewes standing here at the fence outside of our house, the guard dog is over to the far left, and laying right behind her is one of those black protein tubs that I talked about. This dog drags one of those tubs around with her everywhere she goes, because the day we take it off is the day she's going through the fence, and she's just going to wander around the house aimlessly and go to 5 other pasture fields and maybe go to the neighbor's house if she feels like it. But if she's got that tub on, she stays exactly where she's supposed to be. So they need to learn to stay with the flock. No matter what you have to do, they need to learn to do it. And again, we put that tub on her. Somebody told us about that deal, and we put it on her at a young age, and it's worked great ever since. But if she breaks one of those tubs, or we take it off of her for some reason, she'll wander a little bit. She doesn't go far, and she'll come right back. But it's just a nuisance to deal with. As far as offering shelter to dogs, I mean, you guys, depending on where you are in North Carolina, I mean, you probably got similar weather to what we have up here, or maybe even a little bit warmer. You can offer shelter to these dogs in the wintertime. Most times they're not going to take advantage of it. I mean, if it's a hailstorm or a pouring down rain, and we talked about thunder earlier, most of our Pyrenees do not like thunder. They want to come in the barn. They get a little shook up by thunder. So, you know, sometimes they'll do that, but once that storm's over with, they're going right back out. As far as wintertime, I've seen 3 feet of snow on the ground. These dogs are out there right in the middle of it. They don't care. That doesn't seem to phase them. If it's below 0, they don't care. They just seem to stay outside and lay in the snow as come in the barn. They just don't want to come in. They're built for it. That's what they're made to do. And, you know, we've made little shelters. We put some of the little igloo houses. We've done different things to offer shade or protection from snow or rain. And 90% of the time, they do not take advantage of anything we offer them. So that just tells me they're comfortable, they're happy, and they're doing their job. So good dogs will instinctively know what to do. It's up to you as an owner not to screw that up. So you can set them up for failure really quick, or you can set them up for success in the same amount of time. So no matter how good the genetics are on these dogs that you go out and you hear from breeders, oh, well, you know, they came out of this line or that line. And, you know, they may talk about how great the gene pool is on these dogs. Really, you'll dictate the success of that dog and how you handle it more so than the genetics will play a role in it. I'll about guarantee it every time. So anyway, that's the talk. And I will stop sharing the screen and you guys come on back.
Got a question for you, Lee, about grooming. I've got 2 Pyrenees, and one, she's got a very thick undercoat and doesn't shed very well. And every year I contemplate whether I should take the clippers to her and just clip her off, or to sit there for 3 weeks combing and combing and combing on her. What's your thought on clipping a dog down that doesn't shed real well?
I would just clip them, the sooner the better. I mean, they need those long guard hairs in the wintertime. That really helps kind of protect them from the elements. But as you start getting into spring and winter, or weather starts to warm up, you know, I always like to clip them, because it seems like springtime with rain and mud and dirt and being around a lambing barn, those dogs are going to lay down and who knows what, they're going to roll in it. They don't care to be dirty. The more dirty that old guard hair gets, that's when you start getting mats to build up. And once those mats build up on those Pyrenees, it's a nightmare trying to get them cut off. And we've seen hot spots pop up on those dogs where mats are, and those are really nasty to deal with. So I always like, even if nothing else, you don't have to slick shear them. You know, you don't want to go all the way to the skin, but if you can take a set of trimmers, if you've got a dog that's willing to let you do it, that's another case. But just a set of clippers and just cut that those long guard hairs, just get rid of a lot of that filth to start with, and that'll save a lot of those mats from even developing. It'll help in the long run as summer goes on, and then you can always come back and trim a little bit more off. But it's a whole lot easier than combing.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something to that, though. I talked to a groomer one time, and when I asked about clipping a dog down, and she recommended not doing it because the guard hairs never come back, and the undercoat gets thicker and thicker every time you do it. And my mother did that with a dog one time, and what that groomer said, it was true with what happened with my mother's dog.
Okay. Well, and like I said, we've never gone.
Coming from a groomer who told me this, and I've seen it, you know, with my mother's dog. So.
Well, we've never gone as far down to get that undercoat because, you know, even when it's hot and you think those dogs are hot and they want to be slick sheared, they don't.
Yeah.
You know, that undercoat is really kind of an insulation for them, and it helps them moderate that body temperature. Now the guard hairs, you know, I've never heard they won't grow back. You know, like I say, we just try and do it to keep from getting mats building up, and we have had to comb them out before or take scissors and trim them off. But usually, I mean, that even the guard hair coat tends to thicken back up in the wintertime on ours.
Maybe you're not cutting it short enough to be a problem. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I said, we don't get close. I mean, we don't get close to the skin because we want to leave that undercoat there because, like I say, it even helps them during the hot part of the summer, helps them to regulate their temperature.
And also, if you know anybody who's looking for a livestock guardian dog, I actually have 5 that are older puppies now that are actually trained with sheep, goats, and small pigs. They were born in September. Actually, about the time they were ready to go home, I seriously broke my arm and couldn't deal with finding homes for them. And then we got into the shutdown and couldn't find homes for them. So now I'm like needing to get them into homes. But I mean, all the problems you said that can happen, they have never been a problem with these dogs. They have been really good ones. They're actually a Maremma Pyrenees cross. So if you know anybody who's looking.
Well, the premise of this conversation and this talk was mainly geared around problems people have. That's typically what I hear most of the time when people call asking questions. And you know, if you have a good dog, most of the time you don't hear people say how wonderful their dog is. Usually it's problems. So, you know, I'm just putting my 2 cents in on problems that I've seen, heard about. So, and again, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be. We've raised a lot of puppies over the year. We've had a lot of guard dogs. We have a lot of sheep. But you know, I'm just here to talk about my experiences with them. So,
Lee, in your opinion, do you find more success with male dogs or female dogs?
I've had successes and failures with both, and I honestly can't say one's better than another. I tend to like female dogs a little bit better. I think they're a little more even tempered. But you know, as far as being a good guard dog, you know, the best guard dog I ever had was male. But the majority of the dogs we've had have been females and have done a great job for us. But I think it really, if you're not going to breed the dogs, I definitely recommend getting them spayed or neutered, because you're opening yourself up to problems if you don't. You know, the male dog, all it takes is getting a whiff of a neighbor's female Yorkie in heat, and he's going to be trying to get out. Or your female dog who comes into heat And we witnessed this firsthand. We had a Pyrenees, 115-pound female Pyrenees, sitting out in the field, turned around looking at a Jack Russell trying to mount her hip. I mean, it was quite a sight to see with a 3 and a 4-year-old in the house. But you know, you're just enticing problems. And if that female is in heat and she's receptive to another dog coming in, you don't want that happening. Even if it's a small dog that's not going to cause problems for your sheep, it's just the fact that it can happen.
Lee, John Satterfield here. What about nutrition? Do you have recommendations? We've been feeding the Purina Pro Plan, I think, but I know that a lot of folks actually feed raw meat. You have any offerings on what to feed these? And I have Pyrenees, by the way, but just curious about that.
You know, I'm not going to say anybody's right or wrong on the raw meat thing, because I know a lot of people that, you know, have ground lamb or something in their freezer that got freezer burnt, or, you know, freezer quit working. They got to get rid of something quick, or, hey, I got some beef liver, you know, I'm not going to eat this stuff. I got to get rid of it. Dogs will eat it. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know that I give it to them a lot. You know, I don't think I'd feed them that daily. But, you know, one thing that we have seen over the years, especially raising pups, you know, those female dogs are going to lose a lot of blood having a litter of puppies. And getting that iron built back up with a liver or a raw meat, you know, it does great to get them back on their feet and get them healthy again and feeling good. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But as far as just a daily routine feeding, you know, we don't use anything fancy. I think you definitely, starting a puppy, want to keep them on a puppy food or a large breed puppy food for about the first 4 to 6 months. Then you kind of need to gauge how big that dog is getting, because a lot of times they can get too much protein and energy from that puppy food. So if you get them to that 4 or 6 month old age and that dog's starting to get really big on you and you're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want one this big, go ahead and switch him over to an adult food. You know, just kind of trail back that protein level a little bit and let him grow on out a little bit slower. You know, because a lot of times with those large breeds, if they grow too fast, you can get into some hip dysplasia problems later on. A lot of times tendons and ligaments, you know, if they're growing too fast, a lot of times they don't develop kind of properly. So put them on a good food, you know, and again, what's good food? Purina Pro Plan, Alpo, you know, some are better than others. We all know that. But honestly, our old dogs that we've had for years and years, we've had really good success. And I'm not putting a plug out for this. Don't take that by any stretch of the imagination. We've had really good luck with the Retriever brand that they sell at Tractor Supply. And having people from all over the place coming to get puppies from us, you know, it's just a good central location that most people have a Tractor Supply somewhere close by, or they can, you know, when we've compared the labels on the Sam's Club brand of food and the Tractor Supply Retriever brand, it's very similar. There's not a lot of difference. So, you know, just, you don't need high pro stuff. If it's wintertime and it's cold and you think your dog might be losing a little bit of condition, yeah, jack them up a little bit. Get them some high pro stuff. Put them on it. Summer months, when they kind of tail back on what they're eating because it's hot and they don't really feel like they want to eat, you can offer them a little bit less with a better quality food. Or if you've got a chow hound that is just going to continue to get fat on whatever you feed it, then yeah, get it something cheap with not a lot of nutrition, because they can get too fat on you too, especially if they've got a little lazy streak in them. Sometimes they do. You know, a lot of times these dogs do a lot of work at night that we don't see. We know they're out working because we can hear them barking. But, you know, most of the time during the daylight hours, especially this time of year, if If there's nothing going on around the farm and the sheep are laying in the shade because they got their belly full of grass this morning, that dog's going to be laying in shade asleep somewhere, probably because it's been up working all night long. So you kind of got to gauge how much your dog eats. You got to watch kind of what their body composition is. And like I say, you can have a chow hound that will get fat too quick, and you need to monitor that. But, you know, as far as exactly what to feed them, it's going to depend a lot on the dog.
Lee, this is John. What do you recommend starting feeding them with the ewe flock? Because it's going to take some aggressive dogs to keep the sheep away. It's too expensive to feed the dog food to the sheep.
Exactly. Yeah, and there again, that's going to depend on your dog as well. Now, if you got, most of ours get fed once a day, and we feed them when we go out and checking sheep late in the evening. They know if the sheep hear something hit that dog food bowl, a lot of times they're going to come running up, be curious. If that dog's getting fed once a day, he's not going to let those sheep in that dog food bowl. Now, if you happen to have a dog that is really aggressive around food, you know, and we've had them on self feeders before, because we know they limit themselves on what they eat. And we've had those dogs that, you know, we felt like we needed to leave free choice food in front of them or they would lose body condition. But you have to have that special dog that knows, hey, if I see those ewes going over there toward that feeder, that food's mine. It's not theirs. So you kind of got to let the dog dictate how you feed them in a lot of cases. And sometimes you may have that dog that's a little bit reserved, that doesn't like being kind of in that confined space with a bunch of sheep around. And you may need to do something, you know, get the sheep occupied over here and walk over and feed the dog in the corner somewhere to give it its time to go over there and eat and feel comfortable. Because we've had dogs like that too. They just don't like eating around the sheep. So you just kind of got to pick a time and a place to go feed them when the sheep aren't around. And again, if those sheep are out grazing early in the morning, you know, it's a good time. Start your routine feeding of that dog in a morning routine when the sheep aren't even around and that dog's coming in from being out working all night. It may want to get its belly full and then lay down and take a nap.
The way I dealt with the sheep and the livestock trying to get the dog food is I put a dog kennel in the pen, in the field, and then I take the dogs into the dog kennel to feed them. And then when they're finished, let them back out. That was the best thing that I could come up with to keep the livestock from eating it, because I couldn't keep them away. So I just put a kennel in there, and the dogs are trained. They go in the kennel. They know what's coming.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a dog that's aggressive enough to turn around and nip at those sheep and back them off saying, no, this is mine. You know, if you don't have a dog that's going to do that, then you need to help that dog be able to eat his meal every day. That's a great idea.
At the age they are now, they probably would. But you know, they were younger when they were in there, so they weren't able to defend themselves as easily as they could now. But it's still more animals for them to defend their food, so the kennel works best.
Right. Yeah, and those, you know, it's just like that slide I showed with that pup in that small area. You know, when we would go feed that puppy, we would put its bowl of food in the crate, shut it in the crate while it ate, and then go back and let it back out later for free space. So, yeah, with young dogs especially, you need to kind of help them along till they get a little more size and aggression to them for food. And if you've got a pair of dogs, sometimes you need to be considerate of that. You may have one that's a little more aggressive about food than the other. And if you feed them at the same time, one just sucks it down and then goes right to cleaning the other one's bowl up and runs it out. Or you could have a dog fight on your hands. So again, you just kind of got to let circumstances dictate themselves and find a way to work around it.
There's a question on here. Is there any legislation protecting the livestock guardian dog owners from neighbors about the night barking?
I don't know if there's any legislation. I mean, that would probably be a state by state thing. Um, I mean,
I don't know about this legislation, but I know it just went to, it was in the federal court system in California. I can't remember whatever circuit's out there. It was a lawsuit over upset about guardian dogs being noisy and and court upheld that, you know, livestock guardian dogs noise is not a nuisance. That was in federal court in California, so I assumed they would, you know, potentially apply.
if that's in California, it'll fly anywhere.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I've in all my years, I've had one neighbor complain about my guard dogs barking at night. And once I explained to them why that dog barked at night, and that's the reason I have that dog was to make noise and pee on the fence and protect my livestock because that's part of my livelihood. Never had another problem, not another question. You know, hey, I'm sorry, but it is what it is.
I got a subdivision built across from me, so they make more noise than my dogs do at night. Their dogs yapping, so.
Yeah, yeah.
I found out some breeds tend to bark more than others. I think I've had all breeds. I've had them since the late 80s. I never raised them. I just have a pair. And certain breeds, I think, yap more, where other breeds don't bark as much. And the two breeds I have right now, they don't bark only when something important or putting out a warning.
Yeah. And you know, we've got some of ours. Sorry, train's coming through. Let me shut the window. You know, we've got a couple of our guard dogs that actually are really good with birds flying over, the vultures that I was talking about. You know, we've got a couple of those females in separate fields, and anytime any buzzard or bird of any kind flies over, they take off right out of the barn, barking like crazy, just looking up at the sky. And again, both of those are females. The male dog we have, he wouldn't care. I've seen him laying next to the fence, and one of those vultures light on the fence post right beside of him, and he will not turn and bark at the thing the first time. So some guard dogs will protect you from the sky and the ground, and some won't.
Well, are there any other questions? We really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Someone asked, what do you recommend for vultures?
They are a federally protected bird, labeled as migratory, I think, or at least they're on the migratory bird list. I guess I will tell you what the game warden told me. That's how I'll start this. Some of the black-headed vultures, we were gone on vacation, or actually it was over Christmas. We left and we had some young ewes turned back in a field that had plenty of grass in it. I wasn't worried about them while we were gone. I was like, there's plenty for them to eat. We came back and we had 5 of them dead at the end of the week, and a tree full of the black-headed vultures. And it was obvious, you know, I knew our fence was good enough back there. It did not have any coyote pressure, but I had a guard dog in an adjoining field. He couldn't get back there with them. So I know it was those black-headed vultures. Called the game warden in. He came and looked at it. Typically, they like to roost in old dead trees. And there just happened to be one of those next door on the neighbor's property, and that's where they were staying. The game warden told me, he said, shoot one, hang it up in that tree, and the rest of them will leave. That's what I did, and they left, and we didn't have any more trouble. So.
I'll back you up on that, Lee. I had the same issues with black vultures, and they brought the wildlife office brought out an effigy. It was a plastic effigy that we hung up, where they were actually roosting in an old silo, and they hung that up the top of the silo, and they were gone. Didn't have a problem with them. So that's black vultures. The effigy is the best, or dead ones.
Yeah, but they can be aggressive. They are nasty creatures. They really are. They can cause a lot of problems, especially during lambing season.
Well, are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Andy, thank you so much for having us host on this platform. And if you did not get a chance to put your email in the chat, we would greatly appreciate you doing that so we can get this information back out to you. We appreciate everybody for